Welcome to 843 TV. I'm your host, Lisa Richardson, and we are in our studio today, and we're excited to talk with some guests here on Hilton Head Island about some very important issues and some exciting events. First up, we'll be talking with Shari Mendrick. She is the Floodplain Administrator with the town of Hilton Head Island, here to share with you some very important information about flood zones and flood time, especially it's hurricane season. Also, we'll be talking to Heather Rath, who always has exciting events to share. So stick around for this episode of 843 TV, where communities come to speak.
.843 TV, where the Lowcountry comes to speak.
.843 TV,
where communities come to speak.
Welcome to 843 TV. We are in the studio today, and we're going to be talking with some folks from the town of Hilton Head Island. And first, we have Miss Shari Mendrick, who is in charge of a very important subject. You are the Floodplain Administrator. What a cool title that is. Welcome. This is your first time on 843 TV on WHHI, and we're glad to have you.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I'm happy to be here.
Yes. So you've been with the town of Hilton Head for 3 years, and you've got about 20 years of experience in this area. So why don't you share a little about your background? And
Sure. Once again, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to you about this very important thing, or at least it's very important to me. I actually moved to this area. I'm originally from North Carolina. I'm a graduate of UNC Wilmington. My background is actually in geology, which is a little bit unusual, but I got into floodplain management about 20 years ago when I moved to Columbia County, Georgia. And the floodplain management there is a little bit different. It's mostly riverine flooding, whereas here we have mostly coastal flooding. So it was a really nice change halfway through my career to start learning about the coastal flooding and realizing how important getting this information out to our community is on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And beyond just hurricane season, which we're kind of in right now, we're going to talk about that in a minute, but just give us a little bit more detail. What do you do with the town of Hilton Head? What does your role consist of on a daily basis, on a broad basis?
There's actually two programs that I manage for the town. They're both voluntary programs, but one is very important. It's the National Flood Insurance Program. And as a participant in the National Flood Insurance Program, the town has adopted an ordinance and the official Fema flood insurance rate maps. And as part of that, we regulate building in our area. There's certain things we have to keep track of. And the good thing is as a participant, flood insurance is available to every resident in our community, whether they be renters or homeowners. So it is very important that we keep this program in play. And as a participant, flood disaster assistance is also available when there has been a catastrophic event. There's another program that I administer that is a voluntary program, and I actually handle a lot of the coordination for the community rating system. And it's kind of a bonus point type of program. I do various things like outreach, like our conversation here today. We have regulations that protect our water bodies, and also we have a little bit of higher regulatory standards, a little bit more than the minimum FEMA requirements that we administer through our ordinance. And we do that for our citizens to get them a 25% discount on their flood insurance premiums if they're in the special flood hazard area. So it's strictly a bonus program, but we keep up with that annually so we can make sure our citizens get a good discount. And for our community, it equates to about $5 million annually in flood insurance savings.
That was one of my questions that I was going to ask you, because flood insurance, private flood insurance, can be expensive, and there surely are lots of residents who just can't afford it. So how can that get assistance in that area? There is assistance for them.
Yes, so It is definitely worth looking into the FEMA flood insurance program. The rates are subsidized by the federal government. You can get up to $250,000 worth of contents coverage and $250,000 worth of structural coverage, $100,000 worth of contents coverage for minimal premiums.
Good to know. See,
Yes.
I didn't even know that. Now, do those typically come with, do you have to qualify? Is there an income level basis for the FEMA insurance?
Not at all.
Oh, great.
Because the town participates and has adopted the maps, any citizen can get flood insurance for their property, including renters.
Wow. See, that's something I didn't even know. And I have lived here for 20 years.
Oh,
plus 20 years, 20 years plus. So great information for sure. Now, what can residents do to protect their property? What are they able to do as you prepare for hurricanes and other storms? How can they prepare their property?
The very first and foremost thing that is important if you own property on Hilton Head Island, please remember that you are on a barrier island.
Yes.
Insure your property. Homeowners' policies do not cover damage due to flooding. So it is very important that you have this supplemental policy or a flood insurance policy to cover any damage due to rising water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't want to learn the hard way, I guess, right? For
Exactly.
Sure. For sure.
One thing is that if you have had repeated flood losses and your home has flooded several times, please consider mitigating your home. Please consider elevating your home to get yourself up and above and out of that floodplain. There's also, when we look at building permits, when people are just starting to build their home, we also do look that they build to a minimum flood elevation. And we also look that they use certain materials below the base flood elevation. So that way, if the underneath of a home was inundated with water during a flood event, the damage would be minimal because the materials that were used to construct the area are flood resistant.
Now, this is interesting, too, because probably there are still a lot of older homes on Hilton Head Island. There's certainly a lot of brand new homes, too. So the materials that they've used to build over the years have changed, and now they're probably a little more aware of, hey, what's safest for a storm. Can you give us an example of building materials that are better to use than others?
FEMA does require that anything below the base flood elevation is flood damage resistant. So we look for pressure treated materials or materials that have been approved by FEMA to go below that base flood elevation as to cause the least amount of damage.
Mm-hmm. So as a homeowner building a new home, there's a lot to think about.
Yes.
And if you're a homeowner that has an older home, might be a good idea to kind of inquire and say, what can I do now, reconstruction-wise, to help with this? Never a bad time to consider that.
Right. And I will go and visit a home, visit a site, and I can give recommendations on how people can improve their flood insurance rate. Really, any retrofits that they do could improve their flood insurance rate or try to help them make a sound decision on what they can do to protect themselves from flooding.
Are there, besides the obvious areas that are waterfront, where are there areas on the island that are maybe a little more prone to flooding than others? Can you help us with sharing a little bit about that?
Yes, we do have some low-lying areas in our community. We have FEMA has mapped for us what are called repetitive loss areas. So they are areas where there have been repeated flood insurance claims. So areas such as North Forest Beach and South Forest Beach, those are some of our low-lying areas. There are some areas, the Point Comfort area. That is one of our big low-lying areas where we've seen repeated flood losses. That is actually a really good area to talk about just briefly because several homeowners there have elevated their homes. So they had experienced repeated flood losses and they worked with the town or on their own decided to elevate their home to reduce their flood losses. We have a couple areas in Palmetto Dunes as well that are low-lying areas. But as you move to the north side of the island, Hilton Head Plantation and Port Royal is where we start to get out of those areas that are low-lying.
Yes, and that's what I understand, that the north end is a little bit higher, but they're still not immune to it. So not to take that as a for sure safe proof that you won't have a flood issue.
Yes.
So people can protect their property. They can look at redoing or rebuilding. That's a kind of a bigger scale. What about a smaller scale? Anything else on a smaller scale that they can be doing inside the home to help protect against potential floodwaters?
Well, inside the home is really kind of difficult with some of the older homes because they were built on a slab when the floodplain elevations were not in effect. But the biggest thing that people can do is protect themselves. We have several different kinds of storms, but the two biggest ones we have are flash floods, which are kind of those afternoon thunder showers. They can drop a bunch of rain in a very short amount of time. And then we do have our tropical systems. Right. So as long as people are prepared and heed to those warnings, then they can protect themselves even if their property is susceptible to damage. So the biggest thing that we try to promote as floodplain administrators is if you see a flooded street, turn around, don't drown.
Yeah.
Do not drive through flooded waters. You don't know if that street has washed away. Only 12 inches of water can carry a car away.
Isn't that interesting? And you hear about that and you think, how could that be? But it's true. And people like to explore, right? They want to see what they could do to get through the floodwaters, but you advise against any of that for sure.
Yes, most definitely. And even a full-grown adult can be swept off their feet in swiftly moving water that's only 6 inches deep.
Wow.
So it is very important to avoid floodwaters at all costs.
So as we finish up our conversation on this very important issue, what are some last-minute tips? I know you've got a website, and that'll be on the screen. People can go and find out more, and I'm sure you can go out and speak to them or visit with them. Wrap up some last-minute thoughts to tell our viewers about this.
Please know your flood zone. That is the biggest thing. Know your flood hazard. Please be prepared for any type of storm. Remember, you are on a barrier island. And, keep our waterways clean. That also helps. So protect those wildlife habitats. Leave the sea oats and the dunes alone. And protect our waterways to protect those things that naturally protect our property and our community.
Absolutely. Well, good advice. It's a subject none of us really want to talk about, but it's a reality here living in this beautiful place. It comes with it. So I'm glad to meet you, Shari, and I'm glad that you all have been tuning in to 843 TV. Stay here. We'll be right back with some more.